All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team, and we're doing our Design Shop Talk again today to see what questions you might have and try to get them answered. If you have questions while we're live, please go ahead and type them in on the comments on the little chats. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. And if you see me looking off to the side, I have a second monitor over there where I keep both platforms up so I can kind of try to keep track of what questions come in so we can at least try to talk to them. All right, well, I'm going to jump in with the questions I had ahead of time. Quick looking, it looks like we are live on both platforms, so I'm good to go. All right, so again, thanks for joining us. So to start off, I found a few questions on YouTube actually, so I want to go ahead and address those. Is there a way to make the right side bigger so I can see it better? All right, so let's look at different ways we can make that bigger. So overall, you have a few options for making things larger. So let me go to a design. And so let's say I want if I just want to address this tree, I can come over here and within this area here, if I right click and go to tree image size, I can change the images to being different sizes, right? So I can adjust it that way. So I can do small, medium, large for these. So that's one way to address it. Another would be to go into, and this is not just on your tree, this is going to be everywhere. Okay, so I can go Tools, Options, go to Preferences, and down here you'll see I've got the option to change my icon color or sizes. So I can go to Medium, hit Apply, and all my icons get bigger. I will be honest, it makes me crazy, so I'm going to change it back down to small. But you can do it that way as well. But yeah, that's kind of the two options you have for making things larger on the screen. Other ways, which I wouldn't suggest, is changing the resolution of your monitor and things like that. That's kind of my view backwards. But I used to do that before I figured out these other tricks. Okay, what else do we have? Where's my PowerPoint? All right, so there's that one. There was a question the past 2 weeks about using a Stream Deck. So I did get with engineering, and they are aware of a similar issue with another external keypad, and it's a current logged issue that engineering is working on. So they did go ahead and add the Stream Deck to that, so that as they're working it, they'll go ahead and get that addressed as well. And it's something they're working on for a future release. Okay, so it doesn't help you for today, but they are aware of it and they're working on getting that updated. Okay. Well, let's see. All right, how to digitize for a cap. So, let's see. I don't know what that is. How do I get the words off my screen as it takes up too much of the viewing area? I assume you mean the auto-generated closed captions. You should be able to kind of hover over the video and click on captions and tell it to turn them off. They're auto-generated closed captioning, so I assume that's what you're asking about, but I don't know for sure. Okay, so that was on Facebook. Since I'm looking, let me go look at others. All right, nothing on YouTube yet. All right, so how to digitize for a cap. So we do have a article out there under cap digitizing. It's on the Melco service site. So if you go to, well, I can show you how to get here actually, but we'll get you this link. So if you go to Melco-service, click on the FAQ, and I did that really fast, I'm sorry, right here. So you see that FAQ? If you click on that, you can search hat digitizing and digitizing techniques for caps. All right. So if you click on that, it'll take you to an article that has a lot of good information for you. Everything from digitizing for caps, it's got links to videos. And if you go on Melco's YouTube, you can also search for caps within their channel, and you'll find a lot of good information there. In general, if you look at, let's open it. All right, so they've got some discussions on, push pull and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good information out here. But when you're digitizing for caps, the key thing to think about is you want to sew away from things that are anchored, right? So typically that's going to be the center seam on a cap and the bill of the hat, because those are generally really rigid and they can't move, right? So if you're sewing towards something that can't move and the fabric is kind of rippling as it goes, what's going to happen? You're going to create kind of a little ripple on there, a pucker, something. You're going to create an effect you don't want. So that's why when you digitize for caps, you kind of want to go push all your sewing out. So center out and from bottom to top. That's because, if fabric moves as it's sewing this way, it doesn't matter because that's the side of the cap. Same with here. If you're sewing out, you're going towards the side. Up, you're going to the top. Again, there's nothing that's going to affect it. So that's really what you want to think about when you're digitizing for caps. Now, short of that, it's just a matter of working through your designs, right? So I've got this guy here that was, that Scott did, I believe, a while back. And my icon things are all there. So if I go through and draw it, so what you'll see is it started out with the underlay doing half, pushing out and then pushing out. And then it's, again, pushing from bottom up. And it really is just about working through the design in a logical manner, that you're finishing as you go, that you're kind of working your way out with all the base layering, that you're going center out and bottom to top. Okay, and that's really all it is. You have to look at each design individually and just plan your way through it. Good morning, Lorena. Another above zero day in Alaska. Awesome. And Gabby, thanks for joining. It's nice to hear from y'all. All right, so let's see. So that's really, for hat digitizing, it's the same as you would do anything else. The only consideration you have to think about is pushing out and up, okay, as you're sewing. All right, so this one was, I had a design. It was an EXP. I loaded in DesignShop and colors were all over the place. When I opened it in OS, it showed up again in all sorts of colors. So I have to change it back. What am I doing wrong? All right, so to understand this one, you really need to look at or understand a little bit between the file types. All right, so all the extensions on, let me get back to DesignShop 1 moment. Okay, so the extensions on your files, so that's kind of OFM, DST, EXP, those sorts of things. All of those file types, by whoever the original creator was, they decided what information was stored in that file. Okay, so things that all embroidery machines need to know is, where does my needle go to make a stitch? Where does it move to make a stitch? So back and forth sort of thing. Trim commands, it needs to know. It needs to know when there's a stop for a color change. But depending on the file type, the actual colors aren't put in there. Okay, so your EXP file type does not save color information within the file. It literally doesn't. The colors of your design are not saved in that file. So when you open it, there's no info there. So the software is going to pick whatever it wants. Okay, it is a predestined colors, but it's usually crazy colors, right? So if I go open up on my C drive designs, I have an EXP, or I have a DST. DST is another one where color information is not saved within the file. So if I open that one up, what do I get? A bunch of crazy colors, right? So whether that's the colors I want it to sew in or not, it doesn't matter. It's going to bring up, because that information isn't saved in the DST. So if you want color information to be saved, you have to use a format that saves color. So those are going to be your OFMs. So an OFM is native to DesignShop. That's going to save all your color information. Other ones that save colors are going to be a PES, an ART, a JEF. Trying to think which other ones save color information. I'm sure I'm missing one. EMB. It's got to be an older version for it to work with here. There's a few others. I think one other. HUS saves color information. All right, so those save the actual thread colors in the file. So when you open it, it'll pull them up for you. Okay, so if you have an EXT or a DSP that you've bought from somewhere and you want it to save the colors, that's great. Open it in DesignShop. Come over here and change the colors. So let's say I want to change my pears to yellow. That's 1623. Maybe I want the leaves to be 1988. The birdie, let's make it, colors birds, white, 1805. And let's do all the background outlines in black. So let's say that's what I wanted. Well, now I'd need to go File, Save As, save it as an OFM. And now next time I go to open this, those colors will be saved within it. When I open it in DesignShop or in OS, those colors will show up as the design colors. Okay, so does that help? It's really just a matter of the file type of why it's happening. So like I said, use OFM, use Jeff, Huss, Pess, Art, they all save color information. Okay, what else? My OS keeps shutting down when I restart it. Sometimes it will not start. I personally would start looking at your computer and your computer specs and your graphic card. But the best thing I can recommend, Susie, would be for you to get on the phone with tech support and let them log in and take a look at it, see if there's anything that they can drill down for you. So that way they can also see what's going on. You can email them at, what is it? service@melco.com is another way. On YouTube, we have a question. Are there any bean stitch fonts in DesignShop? There's one. So if I go click on the lettering, I go to bean, I think it's bean block. So yeah, there's one. There's not a whole lot. I think that is the only bean block font there is, built in natively. So the others you would have to digitize. Okay. All right, I got all the questions. We talked about that one. I'm struggling to find a way to digitize without getting puckers on stretchy fabrics. So I'm looking forward to, all right, so you would, okay, so really your fundamental problem here is you're getting puckers on stretchy fabrics and you want to avoid it. So when dealing with stretchy fabrics, if you think of performance wear or even Lycra or things like that, it moves, right? It stretches. So yes, there's a digitizing aspect to it, making sure that you've got digitizing not too heavy, because if you have densities that are really dense, you're going to push fabric around more. Okay, so that's one consideration. The other is now to go look at how you're hooping and how you're setting it up when you go onto the machine. So the name of the game is hold it still, right? Stop it from being able to stretch and to move, because the more it's shifting around, the more you're going to see puckers. All right, there isn't a good article, and I think there might even be a video, if I'm not mistaken, on performance wear. But how I personally do it is I use spray adhesive 505, K100, whatever your spray adhesive tool of choice is, right? So I'll take spray adhesive, spray it on the stabilizer, take a second stabilizer at a 45-degree angle and stick it together. Okay, usually I'll use something like Cut Performance or a Weblon no-show mesh, something like that, because usually the stretchy fabrics are lighter, right? So having 2 layers of a 3.1 ounce heavy stabilizer may not be ideal. All right, so once you do that, take your shirt, turn it inside out, and I'll usually, or whatever the fabric is, spritz again my 2-pack of stabilizer and stick it to the shirt. When it's nice and flat, it's not stretched out, it's stable, it's nice and flat how you want it to embroider. Why do you do that? Or why do I do that anyway? And it's because I'm taking that fabric that likes to move around and I'm securing it to something that doesn't move around, right? And that's what that spray adhesive does for me. So then when I go to hoop it, one, I'm not going to be overstretching it. because that will cause you issues. And it's already stuck to the stabilizer. So when you go to embroider it, it's going to have less ability to actually move around to create those puckers. Okay. So that would be my suggestion there is one, lighten up your densities. Okay. So on the digitizing front, a lot of people will overdo it. So they'll have really tight densities. So really low densities. And what that does is it puts too many stitches in a small area. And with a fabric that always wants to move around, it's going to shift it more. All right. You can also use the same technique we talked about for caps on the digitizing. Center out, because what that does is it pushes out so it's even. So you're not pushing towards something and moving things in one direction. Okay. So that's another way. And then hooping and using your 505 or some sort of spray adhesive to secure your fabric to your stabilizer is also going to help avoid that motion. All right. Pretty much the more stable you can make it, the better you'll be. But don't overstretch it when you go to hoop. Worst thing I've ever seen is when folks will hoop it, decide it's not tight enough, and then they'll start pulling on the fabric in the hoop. Don't do that. What you'll end up doing is overstretching it. So when you pop it out of the hoop, it goes, it shrinks up, and now you've got pucker central, which isn't a pretty look, I don't think. Okay. So those would be my suggestions. This question I don't quite follow. I'm going to guess that's what it means. So factory fonts on the percent next to the size, how do I make it work? That's how I'm going to take that. So let's see. All right, so if I go to factory fonts, let's change it to, I don't know. Let's do that one. No, let's not do that one. Well, it doesn't matter. All right, font. All right, so if I take this font and I right click, go to properties, I double click on it, go to properties, it'll bring up my property box. I assume what you're asking is what do I have to do when I'm using this box right here? If I go super narrow or wider, make that percent small or large. First off, what is that percentage? That's I call it the stretch factor, stretch or squish. That is not the technical name, but that's what I call it. Oops, I'm sorry, my lawn people are here. Hopefully you don't hear that. So what is it actually doing? It's stretching this out. So notice if I make this ridiculous, that number went to 244. If I take this and narrow it up, it goes to 30. All right, so that's the squish or stretch factor. Now, when you're using that, what do you want to think about? A few things. The more narrow you make it, the less identifiable it will be as a font, right? So I'll say rule of thumb, plus or minus 20 to 30%. Good to go. When you start going really narrow, it just starts looking weird and not readable, right? So I'll say personally, I go as low as 60. Should I go that narrow? No, but I do. When I'm trying to fit into tight spaces and I want a specific font. So it works. The narrower the font, the less you want to squish it in, right? So if you've got a really tiny font as it is, like the typewriter font, for instance. So this font is already narrow. So the more I squish it in, the tinier these columns are going to be, and the more likely I'm going to have sewing problems, right? So these are the cases where you got to think about what you're doing and decide, does it make sense or not? If you're not sure, you stretch it down and go, is that too narrow? Well, you can always measure it and decide that way. So how am I measuring that? Right here is my little measurement tool, and I'm just left clicking and dragging roughly around. So this is 30 points right here. I would say for columns like this, anything over 12, 13 is okay. So that's bigger than 12 or 13, so I'm good to go. All right. So if you're unsure, you can always measure it to see how wide your columns are. Now, if you're using big blocky fonts and you make them wide, what sort of changes might you want? So block 2 is a really blocky font. So if I do this, well, that's not the prettiest look, right? Because if you look at it, I got satin stitches here, but then I got this weird fill going on here. So what is that? Well, first off, remember where this is coming from, what's driving that. So if I go into my properties again, so I just selected the font, right click, under top stitching, this number right here is what's driving when this goes from a satin stitch to a fill stitch. Okay, that's what's governing this. It says if whenever a stitch length from one edge of the element to the other gets bigger than whatever number I have in this box, so in this particular case 80 points, it's going to switch it to a fill. All right, so I can verify that by again using my little measurement thing, and going from there to there, and see that's 130 points. Whereas over here, where it's a nice satin stitch, it's 56 points. So that's lower than that 80. So that's why it's a satin stitch versus here. So what can you do about that fill to make it look a little cleaner? Well, there's a few ways you can deal with it. You can go to like an auto split. Okay, so auto split's kind of a fun look. In fact, I really like the look. Another way you can do this is change this to a partition of 6. Go to 501, 501, and that'll, again, is another version of an auto split, which is more centered, that you can then set yourself. And again, it gives you just a different look to it. See that, how it's got kind of that split line down the center? Okay. Yeah, so when you go really narrow, make sure, so if you're going narrow, just, it's a personal preference. Is it readable to you? Do you like it? Yeah. Like I said, I would limit yourself personally, plus or minus 30%. I'll say I go down as low as 60% personally. And gosh, I've done 150, although I don't like it, but I've done 150 on the high side. Okay, so I think that was all of these. I'm going to quick look. I don't see anything on Facebook. No more on YouTube. Okay. We talked about all these. What else do we have? Can I do a cap design on the side and back like left chest? Can I do a cap design on the side and back, side of a cap, back of the cap? Or use a cap design on a shirt? So there's a lot of places. If you're talking about using a cap design on a shirt, absolutely, please do. There's no harm in it. Often, if I ever send stuff out for digitizing for a left chest, I'll actually have them set it up as if it were for a cap, because it's going to sew just fine on a shirt. Being, center out is going to be just as fine as going from one side to the other. And that way I don't have to have two separate designs that I'm keeping track of. So yes, it's absolutely fine to sew cap designs, for a left chest logo. If you're talking about sewing cap designs, on the side panels of hats, yeah, it's just a matter of positioning it where you want. So rotating your cap driver, using your hoop and arrow buttons on your keypad to locate it, trace it, make sure it's where you want it to go, and then sew it out. So yeah, you're now taking a cap design and putting it as a jacket design, that you got to be careful about, right? Because cap designs are typically small. And if you're going to take a 2-inch design and try to make it 12 inches, you might have to end up redigitizing parts of it, because it makes sense to me. If you think about design decisions you make, if I'm doing something that's 2 inches square, when I do borders, I might choose to do them as bean stitches, or satin stitches instead of fill stitches, because it's small. But when I make it really big, now my design space is different. Now where I would have used a satin stitch, maybe I have to use a fill stitch. Or where I use a bean stitch, I would want to use a satin stitch border, because I have larger space. I have more room to work with. So, scaling designs up grossly is something that generally requires some redigitizing of, reworking of the designs, because you make different design decisions on the stitch type you're going to use based on the size of it, which is why whenever you're digitizing, it's always good to set your art to the approximate size that you want the final product to be, because that way you can work with, this is the size I want, now I'm going to digitize, I can make those design decisions as I'm going. All right. What other questions do we have? I don't see any. And I think, yeah, those were all the ones I had sent in ahead of time. So let me scan through. I don't see any on Facebook. Let me look on YouTube. I only see the one on YouTube. So I will wait a second to see if anyone else has any questions. But short of that, I'll be back on Friday. So next week is going to be Friday, and the week after that's spring break. So I think I'll still be able to do it as long as my kids cooperate. So we've got, let us know what you want to talk about, what questions you might have, and we'll try to get them answered. Trying to think if there was anything else I'm missing. I don't think so. So I appreciate you guys joining me. I hope these are helpful for you. And we will, a comment on Facebook. Let's see what it is. Oh, Lorena, thanks. So you guys have a fantastic weekend. I get to go rowing this weekend. I'm doing a rowing clinic, which I'm very excited to get on the water and learn how to actually do the scull. I'm very excited about this. So that's my weekend, along with soccer, mom stuff. So you guys have a great weekend. I will talk to you next Friday and see what questions we can work out for you. So happy sewing, and until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye.